So you're shopping for a used crossover or SUV. What are some cars to avoid? That's what we're talking about in today's video.
Yeah, and we are out here at Dealers Auto Auction of the Rockies, and this is generally where dealers wholesale out cars that for whatever reason they just do not want to sell on their lot. So I think this is a good place to find 4 that we definitely would not recommend.
All right, well, we've got hundreds of cars to look through. Let's go find 4 SUVs that you should avoid. Number 4 on the list, we've got this Jeep Wrangler. Now this is the JK generation of Wrangler, also known as the 3rd generation, built from model years 2007 through 2018. And we're not saying don't buy any Wrangler JK of this generation, because there are good ones. But these early models built from 2007 through 2011 have a pretty bad engine. Let's let Brendan tell you about it.
So under the hood of these is a 3.8 liter V6 engine. And here's the main crux of the problem, is that these have a tendency to consume quite a lot of oil. So much so, in fact, that Motor Trend was reporting that the long-term vehicle that they owned with this engine, they had to put in 2 quarts for every 100 miles that they drove. And I had to reread that once or twice because that is quite a lot.
Now that may not be the case for everyone, that is some extreme oil consumption, but in general the 3.8 developed a reputation for excessive oil consumption, along with other issues including intake manifold gaskets and exhaust manifold cracking. So Brendan, there is another issue with these 3.8s, not related to reliability, but the actual power output itself.
Yeah, these only had 202 horsepower, and although that may be just fine for a Chrysler Town & Country or a Dodge Grand Caravan, when you're talking about a Jeep and you are doing some off-roading and you've got some bigger tires, it's just woefully underpowered.
Yeah, a lot of folks reported 0 to 60 times on these cars of around 10 seconds. And that's just not very good, especially when you're trying to keep up with modern day traffic. So 3.8 liter, especially with a 4-speed auto, luckily this one's a manual, I would probably avoid altogether. Get a 2013 and newer. The 2012s I read had some issues as well, but the 13 seemed to have really improved the reliability.
Yeah, they did put that 3.6 liter Pentastar V6 in the 2012s and newer.
With like 80 more horsepower?
Yeah, well I think they were like at least 70 more horsepower. So it's a huge jump. And getting it out here onto the test track, you can see, you know, flooring it. I got it up to 30 miles an hour on this little test track, and that is just not fast enough to keep up with modern traffic. All right, so next up is this guy here. This is one of the earlier versions of the GMC Acadia. This one happens to be a 2011 model with the 3.6 liter V6 under hood.
Now here's the thing about these cars. They're typically purchased by families, non-car enthusiasts, who perhaps would wait till the oil monitor to change the oil. But according to Pete's Garage, if you do that, these have a tendency to run low on oil, creating major issues down the line.
So ultimately, these cars have major timing chain issues, and really just kind of anything with this 3.6 can have that issue. And because of the location of that timing chain, it ends up being an engine out job in order to repair, which could mean up to $5,000 in cost to you.
Now this basic engine design in these older 3.6s were used in vehicles like the Cadillac SRX, the Buick Enclave, the Ultraverse, that kind of thing. Now this one has some other problems. For example, I don't think the seat actually, that's how we're going to have to test drive it. But let's see how it runs, Brendan.
Oh man.
Badly.
It is not running well.
It is misfiring very badly. Ultimately, if you want a large, comfy family hauler for a small amount of money, you should probably look elsewhere. Next up, we have a vehicle which is not necessarily known for its reliability issues, but it's a vehicle you probably shouldn't buy because there are just better alternatives on the market. We're talking about the Subaru B9 Tribeca, Subaru's first attempt at a 3-row crossover SUV. So Brendan, one of the big issues with the Tribeca is back in 2007, if you were in the market for this vehicle, you probably had a family and you probably had a need for a 3rd row. And this car has one of the worst 3rd rows at least had, maybe ever, on the market.
Yeah, it's pretty comical, honestly, how bad it is. You can see we've got this 2nd row up, and the only way that someone could actually viably sit there with this 2nd row up is if you had no legs.
Okay, well, because I think it would be funny, let's try to see you get back into the 3rd row.
Okay. You want me to get in there?
Yeah, let's give it a go.
All right, well, let's see. So we fold this down. I guess I can slide it forward a little. There's really no room to get in here.
You can also probably, there's a little lever here you can pull and slide it, but let's see how you do.
Oh, jeez.
Okay.
Okay.
You're in.
I'm in. Can you close it?
I'm closing it.
Well, the front seat passengers have no room, but now I've got plenty. Now I'll slide over to this spot here, which is in a normal space, and you can kind of see that, like, my knee here literally does not fit. I cannot get all the way behind this seat that's in a normal driving position. That's just how bad this 3rd row is. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so basically, at least one set of people isn't getting any legroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, another fundamental flaw with the Tribeca was the towing capacity. You see, if you had a bunch of kids and you were buying this big SUV, especially one with a 6-cylinder engine and almost 250 horsepower, you'd expect it to have a pretty good towing capacity, but the Tribeca only could tow 2,000 pounds, which just wasn't enough for a lot of folks who had maybe like a small camper or a small boat.
So under the hood is a 3-liter all-aluminum horizontally opposed H6 boxer motor, which sounds really cool, but think about this. This is only 6 cylinders, yet in the city it only gets 16 miles to the gallon. And just to give you another point of reference, the Tahoe of the time, which had a V8 that could tow like 7,000, 8,000 pounds and have infinitely more space, only got 14 miles to the gallon. So it just did not make sense considering the fuel economy that you got with this.
Yep, so according to the EPA, 18 combined, which is really very poor. Now, it's an interesting engine. Almost no other vehicle, apart from a Porsche 911, has a water-cooled flat 6. But someone buying this car really probably didn't care much about the way their cylinders were opposed. And, you know, when you consider that it only towed 2,000, that wasn't very good fuel economy.
Yeah, it just does not make sense. Again, it is really interesting, but an interesting engine in just a boring, mundane, family, you know, SUV just doesn't make sense. If you're trying to do some cool performance car, I get it, but in just an everyday grocery getter, you need something more practical.
And to put that in perspective, the new 3-row Subaru, the Ascent, gets 7 mpg better combined and has more power than the Tribeca. But I want to talk about the worst problem with this car.
Okay.
You want to close the hood?
Is it this nose here?
It's ugly, Brendan.
Yeah, it's not great, that's for sure.
It's just not an attractive design, and that was also one of the big downfalls of the B9 Tribeca.
I agree completely. Yeah, and that Subaru Ascent that you mentioned also has a ton more space, so it's a car that actually makes sense, unlike the one it replaced. So not only was this design ugly, it wasn't very practical. Now, you see this inlet right here, which you just kind of normally think is an inlet to help cool your car, right? Well, if you peer inside of there, there is your radiator, and a lot of customers are reporting that the smallest little rocks or pebbles just bounce right up and put holes in their radiator because there's literally nothing protecting it.
So next up on this list, we have a vehicle which typically would live on the TFL truck channel, but I want to include it because I feel like it's important that people know, and they also use this engine in an SUV, the Expedition. But we're talking about the Ford 5.4 liter Triton, but the 3-valve Triton, because these engines have a number of issues.
So this engine actually came out in 2004, which this is a 2004 model, but they did offer it all the way through 2010. And here's the main issue, is it's got timing chain issues as well as cam phaser issues.
So the number of issues on the 5.4 is very well documented, but related to the timing chain components, I've read problems with the tensioners, problems with the timing chain guides, which in these engines are plastic, and ultimately a lot of these engines were thrown out of time, and then you're stuck with an engine replacement most of the time because they're just not worth rebuilding. Brendan mentioned the cam phaser issues, which were huge on these engines. That's a shame because older Ford engines, the 4.6 and the 5.4 liter two valves, are some of the longest lived engines in history. But when they moved to the two intake valves and then the one exhaust valve on these three valve motors, that's when the issues really began. So really want to avoid F-150s 04 through 2010. Same thing with the Expeditions of this era. They're just very, very, very costly when things go bad. Unlike the Car Wizard, for example, we'll just replace an engine. And Brendan, it was $6,000 to $7,000 he charges?
Yeah, $6,000 to $7,000, and he was saying how frustrated he was with how often he had to replace engines on these vehicles.
It's a shame though, because the Fords of this era really are good-looking vehicles. You just don't want with that. You just don't want one with that three-valve 5.4.
So if for some reason you do find yourself shopping for one of these, which we are not recommending, listen closely for a slapping sound or for a ticking sound, because that is an early sign of a big expense yet to come.
Well guys, thank you so much for watching this video. We hope we have given you some valuable consumer information on perhaps some used SUVs you should avoid. But Brendan, of the cars we focused on, which one would you not buy the least? Which is your least favorite?
I would have to say probably the GMC Acadia, honestly, because it's one of those things that can happen so fast and so quickly and cost you so much money.
I think you're right on that one. Guys, let us know what you think. Be sure to leave your comments, questions, concerns in the comment section below. This has been Brendan.
And Tommy.
We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.